I am the Ascended Master Godfre. I take this rare opportunity to speak here on American soil. As you well know, as Ascended Master students, that I was embodied as George Washington, therefore considered one of the founding fathers of America. And I wish to give you a certain perspective on how I look at America today and what it means from my perspective, what is going on in the current presidential debate. What was it that was unique about my embodiment as George Washington? I know I have said this before, but it bears saying again. The uniqueness was that after I had been president for some time, I was actually offered that I could be president for life. But I declined because I refused to be like King George of England. Because of what? Because I had the vision that America was meant to be different from the monarchies of Europe and other parts of the world. It was meant to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, even though Lincoln hadn't uttered those famous words at my time. But they were certainly there in the etheric. And some of us who were the founding fathers were quite able to tune in to Saint Germain and receive ideas from him. Now, why did I have this awareness? Well, it actually started in that desperate situation in Valley Forge, where I thought the Revolutionary War was lost. And I went into my tent and went into a state of what has often been called prayer, but which was really communion. Communion with what I saw as a higher force, a higher being that I had had some sense of connection to throughout my life. And so I felt the despair of the outer situation, and I reached out to get some kind of comfort, some kind of vision. Was everything really lost? And I was given the vision that America was an inevitable step in the unfoldment of humankind and this planet. I was literally given the vision that regardless of the outer situation, America was meant to be a reality. And again, this does not mean that certain things are inevitable, that they inevitably must happen. But it means that the image, the matrix for America was lowered into the identity realm, even though I didn't have those concepts at the time. But there it was lowered into the mental, into the emotional, and it was ready to break through into the physical. And literally, the manifestation of America as a physical reality depended on one person, namely me. It didn't mean that I was the only one who could make it a reality. Naturally, all of the soldiers were also part of it. But it did mean that if I had given up at that moment where I sat there on my knees, then America would not become a physical reality at that time. But I also saw that it would become a reality later, even if I gave up. And when I saw this, I had this complete shift of consciousness, an epiphany, a revelation, if you will. And suddenly, instead of giving up, I gave up the ghost of my sense of despair, the sense of what was possible and impossible. And I experienced the reality that there are certain situations in human affairs where with God all things are possible. It doesn't mean literally all things, but it means that the things that you think from a human perspective are impossible, they are actually possible with God. Now, this doesn't mean, and it is important for you to contemplate this, that you should take this to an unbalanced extreme, as the linear mind will always do. And say this means that at any time, everything should be possible with God. But that is not so, because there are the interdependent originations. There are certain situations that must evolve to a certain point before a shift can happen. The American nation could not have been manifest 10 or 20 years earlier. There was a certain configuration of energetic matrices that had to gradually come into place. But they had, this is what I saw in the valley there, in the dark tent, in the darkness of winter, they had clicked into place. And I saw that I of my own self could not make this happen, but if I opened myself up to the acceptance that with God this was possible, then it could be manifest. It wasn't all or nothing. America would have happened anyway, but it would have taken time. And time is sometimes of the essence. So I realized, as Shakespeare expressed it, there's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. And I took that tide, as I had done before in my life. I grabbed it, I arose, I let the ghost, I gave up the ghost of my despair, and I walked out to my men, and they could see I had changed. They could see the fire burning in my eyes, and that fire spread to their eyes. And suddenly, the entire equation had changed. Well, I am not talking about today having Americans be ready to fight for the future of America. I am not talking about those who are ready to take up arms. Who are you going to fight today with guns? The British? They've got enough problems of their own. Are you going to find your own brothers? Imagine during the Revolutionary War that instead of fighting the British, we had started fighting each other. And the British could have just sat back, rolled their thumbs, and waited for us to destroy ourselves. Is this the highest vision you have for America? Then I can tell you, you are way behind the times. There is a much higher vision for America. And you may think that this is a divided situation. Some even think it's desperate. Some think it's lost. America is lost. But America is not lost. It is just on the brink of a new beginning. But many have not seen it. What needs to happen is that a critical mass of people, and that is why I'm speaking this into the collective consciousness, to shake them up. They need to get down on their knees, and they need to be willing to look at the ghost in their own consciousness of how they look at America, and how they look at the situation, and how they despair because they don't see a way out. And then they need to give up that ghost and see that with God all things are possible. There is also a certain configuration of energetic matrices that have gradually clicked into place. And America has the potential to transcend. It is not a given. Certainly, America can go into a temporary detour of conflict and division, of fighting and infighting. But there is a real potential that America can transcend the current division and come out stronger. This is the last thing the dark forces want to see. This is the last thing that the embodied power elite wants to see. This is the last thing that certain external forces such as Putin and Xi in China want to see, or the ones in the Arab nations who hate America as the great Satan. Many people in the embodiment do not want to see it. Many forces outside of embodiment do not want to see it. They are sitting back, rolling their thumbs, thinking, yes, America is in decline. But is it in decline? That is up to this critical mass of people, yourselves among them. You can, of course, help bring about this shift by shifting your own consciousness. Have you been concerned? Have you been pessimistic? Then give up the ghost and realize the potential. See the vision. I'm not asking you to grasp some far-flung vision of what America become in the future, but just grasp the vision that America can transcend the current situation. That there are enough people who really, at inner levels, have had enough of all the infighting, the animosity, the accusations, the mudslinging. They are ready for a new political reality, a new approach to politics in America, a new way of relating to each other. Is it really about proving other people wrong? Or is it about doing what is right for the American people and for the country? Where are you at? Are you pessimists who think you are realists? Or are you the real realists and therefore acknowledge that with God all things are possible? At least with God it is possible to transcend the current quagmire, the current enigma, the seemingly impossible situation. What did I face in that tent? A seemingly impossible situation. Why did it seem impossible? Because of the ghost in my mind, so I couldn't see beyond it. I had fixated my mind on what I thought was a realistic evaluation of the situation. And because I was fixated on this, I couldn't see beyond my own nose and my own self-importance blended with self-pity, that I couldn't manifest this great result that I had hoped for with the outer mind. But when I gave up this outer mind, this outer desire to be the famous savior, I could see that I myself can do nothing, but with God all things are possible. At least it was possible to manifest what could be manifest at the time. And this is the same now. And it is essentially the same in every situation, no matter what it is. Transcendence is always possible. There is no situation where transcendence isn't possible. There are situations where a specific level of transcendence, a specific vision isn't possible, but transcendence is always possible. Surely, most Americans, if they were to hear or read this, would ridicule it, ridicule the idea that George Washington is now an ascended master, and refuse to even consider these words or take them seriously. Obviously, they haven't gone into the rotunda of the Capitol building and looked up on the assumption of George Washington, that pompous picture. But nevertheless, there's a reality behind it. George Washington wasn't actually assumed into heaven, but the live stream that I am later did qualify for my ascension, after that last embodiment as Guy Ballard. And so I'm not expecting people to accept this. I don't care if they accept it without their minds. My point is to simply use your chakras to send this impulse into the collective consciousness to awaken those who can be awakened. That regardless of how the situation seems, transcendence is always possible. And that is how America was founded. That is how America became a reality, because I was willing to transcend myself, and those under my command were willing to transcend themselves. And if a critical mass of Americans today are willing to transcend themselves, then America will go up instead of going into some detour. Just look at the political scenario. Who thinks he is the king who should be president for life? Who thinks he is the savior? And ask yourself a simple question. You have those who believe that this person is sent by God, made by God to save America. But does this person really see it this way, or does he just use whatever people believe about him to promote himself? Does he actually believe that God made him to save America? Has he even fathomed the difference between being the savior or being the open door for the power of God? Has he even fathomed that with God, all things are possible, but only when you are with God, because you have given up the self that isn't God? For if you are to be any kind of savior, it is not the outer self that is going to be the savior. Only if you give up the outer self, you humble yourself, you go on your knees, you give up that ghost. Has he given up his own self-created ghost, his brand that he has promoted his whole life? Has he given it up? If the answer is no, then this cannot be the savior of America. This cannot bring about one nation under God, but only bring division and more division. And someone who doesn't care about the division created, as long as it glorifies his own ego, is not with God. And therefore, all things are not possible. Transcendence of America is not possible. And it will go into a decline, a blind alley that will last for some time, but not forever, because America will transcend itself into the golden age. Again, I know you all see it this way, or you wouldn't be here. You would have gone away claiming this messenger is a false messenger because he doesn't agree with my political views. But I'm speaking it into the collective consciousness. For there are those who are ready to pick up on this. There are people who are right now receiving this thought form of George Washington kneeling in the valley, opening himself up to a higher vision. And they see that they themselves can open themselves up to a higher vision by giving up the ghost of the pessimism, the sense of inevitability. Nothing is inevitable. Certain things are likely to happen because these energetic matrices have clicked into place. But as I said, had I not given up the ghost, America wouldn't have been manifest at that time. So nothing is inevitable. There's always transcendence. And what do we of the Ascended Masters want to see? Do we even have a fixed vision of what America should become? Yeah, somewhat out in the future. But for now, we are really focused on America being far from the golden age. And therefore, what we envision is that America will transcend itself and continue to do so until we can say, yes, America is now a golden age society, which it is not right now by any means. Why? Because of the division. What is the golden age of America? One nation, under God, indivisible, with freedom and justice for all. Well, is America one nation right now? Is it indivisible or is it divided? Does it have freedom and justice for all? Only justice for some, those who can pay for it, those who can buy it, those who can buy political influence to their lobbying groups and this and that. Is it justice for all that you have a power elite and control 98% of the wealth of this nation? There were some among the founding fathers who thought that these gentlemen farmers should be allowed to live their lives on these estates and have slaves do all the work. And they should just sit around discussing philosophy and smoking cigars. I enjoyed discussing philosophy and smoking cigars as George Washington, I freely admit it. I thought I was going to be one of these gentlemen farmers, and I was for the rest of my life. I thought this was a perfectly just system. But looking back, of course, it wasn't. I was in somewhat of an elitist mindset, not as much as the financial elites that you see today, but I was in an elitist mindset. And I didn't ascend by remaining in that elitist mindset, but by giving up the ghost. There are still many Americans who believe that it is necessary to have an elite of these rich people because they drive the economy. Yes, they are driving the economy into the ground. If that's where you want it, well, keep going. But if it's not where you want it, then you have to find a way to address this ghost of the unequal distribution of wealth. Other nations have done it. Not perfectly, but they have at least dealt with the problem. America hasn't even started, even though there are talks here and there. This must be addressed. We must get the elite out of their privileged positions so that the wealth can be distributed to the people who are producing the wealth. This is justice for all. The privileges of the elite are not just. Even if you think in terms of capitalism and free enterprise, still this is not just, because capitalism is an elitist system. Free enterprise is not an elitist system because it isn't a system, it's free. But it is up to a democratically elected government to keep the economy free so that the people cannot be exploited by an elite. And the American government has not fulfilled that responsibility. And again, there are people who are already seeing this or who are close to seeing it, and this can spread like rings in the water, where it becomes clear to a critical mass of people that this must become one of the central points in the presidential debate. Because the self-proclaimed billionaire isn't going to address it. So this is an opportunity for those who are neither self-proclaimed nor billionaires to address the issue. And so with this, I have given you what is my portion of this event, which I must say that we Ascended Masters who are working with America have thoroughly enjoyed. We have enjoyed that you have come together, not only come together physically, but come together in this oneness of hearts that we see in the way you are talking to each other, in the even raising of the energy level that you have achieved through this conference. Look at your conversations and how they are at a very high level, joyful, free-flowing, and rejoice in this. Rejoice in you here below and we above, and that you are coming closer to as above, so below. So with this, I seal you in the flame that I am. For I am God free. I am free and in God, and I want you to be the same.